Well, good morning to all of you, and welcome to our roundtable discussion, Southeast Europe, Competing Visions, Competing Interests, that the Hans Seidel Foundation and the Institute for Development and International Relations are organizing together. We would have preferred, of course, to have you here with us in the Hotel Dubrovnik, but due to the COVID-19 situation, it is still not possible. And unfortunately, I have been telling this for more than a year now, but I hope it would be possible in the foreseeable future. Last year, we have agreed to continue our meeting in this format on a yearly basis with the leading think tanks from the region. Unfortunately, this time we miss our colleagues from Albania, Ms. Albacello, and from Bosnia and Herzegovina, Ms. Denisa Sarajlic, due to unforeseen reasons, but we count on them for our future projects. With this event today, we are commencing a series of roundtable discussions on the future of Europe and its role in the world. But we have decided to start here in the region, since both the Hans Seidel Foundation and the Institute for Development and International Relations continue to strongly support the EU integration process of the Western Balkan countries. The aim of our meeting today is, on the one hand, to discuss the positive or destructive influence of other middle and great powers on the Europeanization of Western Balkan, and on the other hand, to see what the think tanks can and should do to raise and preserve awareness of the importance of the EU accession and the necessary reforms in politics, economy, and society. I would like to thank all our distinguished speakers today, Mr. Ognjev Zlatev, head of the EC representation here in Croatia, Tomislav Sokol, member of the European Parliament, Ms. Jovana Marovic from the think tank Politikon from Montenegro, Mr. Marko Savkovic from the Belgrade Fund for Political Excellence, and Mr. Rade Rajkovčevski, Vice Dean of the Faculty of Security in Bitola. But first of all, I will ask Mr. Klaus Fiesinger, our representative and the regional director for Southeast Europe of the Hans Seidel Foundation, to give you a welcome speech. Being in charge for Southeast Europe, Dr. Fiesinger, you have an excellent insight into the topic, so please share your experience from the region with us. Please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Mrs. Markic. Hello, everybody, dear colleagues. Also by my side, I welcome you on behalf of Hans Seidel Foundation. And I am remembering, of course, very well to our last year's meeting in February, shortly before the breakout of a pandemic crisis situation. And I suppose nobody of us could imagine such a long time of crisis as Mrs. Markic just was mentioning. I think nobody of us was thinking that this year, in this year's event, only Mrs. Markic, Mr. Knisovic, and some people from Technik are located in Hotel Dubrovnik, and the others of us, the other one, are connected only virtually by online. And no Kalchicheva in the evening, no wine, no beer. Such a bad situation. But we will do our best of it. Despite of this, we are confined to this virtual meeting. If I say we, then I mean, of course, our cooperation partner, IRMO, in cooperation with Hans Seidel office in Zagreb. With the, I mean also all the panelists, all the audience, and also, as just Mrs. Markic told it, it's a pleasure of us that we can welcome Mr. Ognjev Zlatev from European Commission and Tomislav Sokol from European Parliament. Much had occurred since our last meeting in February 2020. For example, very eye-catching, of course, this EU Western Balkan Summit in Zagreb in May last year. Especially according to its final declaration, which gave the Western Balkans some European perspective. You know all that the Western Balkan countries were disappointed and annoyed. They hoped in this declaration for some EU perspective, concrete, precise, mandatory, and not some vague, indifferent promise. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have much to discuss today, a very current topic, as you see it in the program. Competing visions, competing interests, and I would like to complete of course, realistic expectations of the Western Balkans, and also realistic danger that non-Western external powers use or abuse, better speaking, the situation as Russia, China, Turkey, and else to spread their influence, to intensify their influence in the Balkans. Maybe, or I'm sure, of course, that you have heard about that in March of this year, there was directed from side of 9 European foreign ministers, among them from Germany and Croatia, some letter to Josep Borrell demanding to relaunch the strategic discussions about forthcoming EU perspective, not European perspective, EU perspective. So I think also in European Union, meanwhile, the alarm and warning bells are ringing. The European Union, of course, is aware that, and Western Balkans too, that European Union is still the biggest donor, the most important trading partner of the Western Balkans, but non-Western external powers are growing political and economic influence, and so it must be our common aim, common Western Balkans and European Union, to overcome that evident stagnation of EU enlargement process. You know, on the one hand, European Union members are complaining, according to the Western Balkans, lack of ability and lack of willingness of reforms. In reverse, Western Balkan states are complaining EU enlargement fatigue or lack of coordination, how to deal with the Western Balkan. And this negative impression, this negative perception about European Union was, of course, aggravated by the pandemic crisis situation. As Vucic was speaking, according to EU solidarity, as a fairy tale. So it is not the best image. And the consequences for European Union is, of course, deterioration of image and influence. There's to ask, is there some way out of this dilemma? And I think this is the topic of today. I expect some very interesting conference, and so back to the moderator. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fiesinger, for your excellent introduction and for stressing the importance of the further EU enlargement process in the Southeast Europe. As you have just mentioned, our partner on this project and co-organizer of this event is Mr. Sandro Knezovic from the Institute for Development and International Relations. And please, Sandro, I would like to ask you for your introduction to the conference, please.
Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you very much indeed. A warm welcome to everyone who is with us today, unfortunately only in this virtual hybrid or whatever you want to call it mode. It's a very unfortunate situation in which we simply cannot be hospitable to anybody due to very well-known pandemic problems that are lasting for more than years and are significantly burdening the functionality of work, of even us who are not necessarily in the production process where you physically have to be in the office. But however, this disconnection with the working society is actually burdening the process. So it's really great to at least be able to see you in this virtual form, hoping that the next time will really be back to the so-called old normal. Regardless of the fact that we have difficulties with organizing live events due to well-known reasons, we are pushing forward our agenda, and our dedication from the last year, as Alexandra correctly mentioned, is to keep on pushing and advocating as loud and clear as possible for the continuation of the process of the EU accession in the Western Balkan countries, regardless of the difficulties, regardless of the real political framework in which these countries are floating today. We, as a dedicated group of experts and think tank representatives, are stubbornly pushing for this, in our opinion, great and beneficial idea to all. Our today's title is The Future of Europe. So the idea is to put it in a little bit of a wider framework of the future of Europe. As you know, this topic is also ongoing and is becoming increasingly hot in the EU. So the idea is to put the debate about the Western Balkans in the future perspective of the EU itself, underlining the fact that actually when you contemplate the future of Europe, you have to take into account the unfinished processes in the region of Western Balkans. So 30 years have passed since the collapse of the communist regime and the introduction of basic democratic institutional procedures. And the fact is that, you know, regardless of the 30 years of support of the EU and NATO, progress in the reforms process is rather modest. And it leaves the region fragile, both in terms of intra-regional relations and resilience to existing security challenges. The complexity of the problems that are unresolved for such a long period of time and the fact that there are severe loopholes of EU policies in the region are opening the perspective for other actors to jump in and to try to re-establish and then further cement their positions. While we all know that when we speak about other actors in the global terms, we speak mostly about China and Russia as the two most prominent global players who are threatening to shake the so-called New World Order that was established by the Western community and in particular the US in the immediate post-Cold War period. In this part of Europe, there are some other players who are worth noticing, not only Russia and China, and of course we would like to focus on Turkey, Arab states, and a new emerging actor, regardless of the fact that it's not in ideological terms in the opposite position vis-a-vis the EU, it's still visible and it's growing. And of course, I'm aiming at the post-Brexit United Kingdom. So the Western Balkans in this current geostrategic and geo-economic environment represents an interesting region where recalculation of strategic balance between different players in an increasingly complicated and deregulated international arena can take place. As it was mentioned above, the region's geographic location and unclear position in contemporary strategic reshuffle due to aforementioned unsuccessful transition process and inability to accede to Euro-Atlantic structures is raising the depth for all others to attempt to take their position and cement it in this part of Europe. The region itself is at the crossroads of migration routes from Asia and Africa to Europe, the so-called and very well-known Balkan route with different types of trafficking, you name it, humans, weapons, narcotics, etc. And it's still a well-known security challenge for the developed West. And the countries in the region, at least due to state apparatuses that are very weak, are very, very favorable exclusive partners of the new emerging players in the region. For all this set of reasons, we decided to gather prominent representatives of regional think tanks and to ask several questions. The first one is there an alternative to the EU accession for the region of Western Balkans? The second, are the relationship of the Western Balkan countries with other big powers disrupting the relations with the European Union? And are the democracies resilient enough to remain on the path of Europeanization? On the other hand, and this is the specific focus on which we would like to concentrate in the second part of our debate, is the role of the think tanks. We have an opportunity to speak with prominent think tank representatives in the region, so we would like to ask the question, what strategy, what steps should the think tanks undertake to preserve the support for the political, economic and social transformation encompassed by the EU conditionality in Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, Montenegro, Northern Macedonia and Serbia? We hope that this debate will yield implementable solutions for the period to come and represent substantial contribution to the existing discourse on long-term consolidation of the Western Balkans. I will stop here in order to be rational with time, and I'm very much looking forward to the debate and to Q&A sessions. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Sandro, for sketching the dynamic processes in the region and for opening many of the topics we are going to discuss here today. I believe it is going to be a very vivid and interesting discussion. We are also looking forward to the questions and comments from the audience, from our Zoom audience. At any time, you can pose a question in the chat box or raise your hand, and we shall include you into the discussion. Our next speaker is Mr. Ognjen Zlatev, head of the EC representation in Croatia. I believe I need not introduce him too much, as he is a well-known face for many of our events and is well present on many occasions and many events throughout Croatia. Mr. Zlatev, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. Dobar dan, dobar den, Mirdita. Good morning to all of you. Thank you once again to the Hans Seidel Foundation, Dr. Fiesinger, and to Irmo for this invitation. It is indeed, I have to congratulate you that regardless of these rather strange circumstances we all live in the last now 1 year, this is really an excellent opportunity, and you keep on leading the way to keep the topic of the future of this part of the world very high on the agenda of the public. As already been mentioned also by Sandro, the topic of this gathering today is really very important and very timely because as you know, just a couple of days ago on Monday, the EU has presented the so-called digital platform related to the Conference on the Future of Europe, which formally is going to be launched on the Day of Europe on the 9th of May in Strasbourg. And I think it's really a very timely and very good coincidence. This was already mentioned by Dr. Fiesinger also that it is very clear, not since yesterday, but since several years already in a row, that there are different strategic and economic and geopolitical interests that are competing over this region, trying to spread their influence. As far as the European Commission is concerned, we have been persistent in providing full support for political and economic reforms in our region here in Southeast Europe. And this is what we are intending to do in the future. Our strong dedication and support for the region was clearly demonstrated. I want to recall, for example, the Sofia summit during the Bulgarian presidency when we presented the strategies and programs for the Western Balkans, but also and especially during the Zagreb summit last year during the Croatian presidency, which enhanced and strengthened the process. And regardless of the fact that it was held in an online format rather than in physical format, we had to, adapt to the COVID pandemic, and it was really unfortunate that the leaders, the European leaders, were not able to meet together with their counterparts from the region. I would particularly like to highlight the green agenda for the Western Balkans, the enhanced connectivity and the economic and investment plan for the Western Balkans. All those programs and strategies designed to speed up the economic development of the region and boost its convergence with the EU. If you allow me, I would like to quote President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who reiterated that the Western Balkans is an absolute priority for my Commission since my very first day. The region's future is in the European Union. Last year, 2020, has been a challenging year, but we firmly stood together. Our economic and investment plan recently adopted will speed up the economic development of the region, and it will boost its convergence, support the implementation of the fundamental reforms, and bring the region closer to the EU single market. This plan can help you change your daily lives, the daily lives of your people, and the business of the region 4 to 5 years from now. Even though the accession process slowed down over the last years, the region has always been, and I mean, you will hear this a lot from representatives from various European institutions, including, I hope, from distinguished Mr. Sokol from the European Parliament. Specially designed economic reform programs, EU funding, and always available technical expertise are proof of that. Of course, the COVID-19 crisis caused general setbacks on many processes and unfortunately changed our attention and focus. European Commission invested huge amounts of money for the development and production of vaccines. The Commission also initiated actions for fair distribution of vaccines for the countries in need. Unfortunately, we as member states, we are also faced with the lack of vaccines or hiccups in the distribution. But nevertheless, we continue to ensure that the countries of the region of the Western Balkans will benefit from the so-called COVAX mechanism. I'm sure you were all well aware that a few days ago, despite the current global shortage, the European Commission ensured considerable amount of vaccines to be delivered for the Western Balkans. The European Commission and Austria concluded an agreement for the delivery of COVID-19 vaccines, and 651,000 vaccine doses that are funded by the Commission will be shared with the facilitation of Austria with all the countries in the region. First deliveries, the regular deliveries will start already in May, and regular tranches will continue up till the month of August. We know that we can fight this together and we can grow economically only together. And that's why we will continue our efforts to support the democratic processes in the Western Balkan states. The need for reforms was often emphasized also by the High Representative Vice President of the European Union, High Representative Joseph Borrell. He stressed the need for reforms in order to ensure sustainable development and social justice. We believe that insistence on structural reforms and democratization will pay off, and that the European Union will be a logical choice for the countries of Southeast Europe. So in spite of the competing interest over that region, the Western Balkans will remain an integral part of Europe and naturally close to the EU. So I'm sure that the future will prove that in all aspects of economic and political development, this is going to happen. So I will also stop here and would like to thank you for your attention and wishing all of us a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zlatev, for reminding us of the important role of the EC in the region and reminding us of all the steps undertaken to speed up the reform process in the region. And as we always say, the future of the Western Balkan countries is in the Europe. Mr. Sokol, good morning to you. I must admit that I'm also happy that we have a member of the European Parliament here with us. And as we could read, the members of the European Parliament fully support Western Balkans' European future. So how would you estimate the influence of external players in the region? What are the members of the European Parliament going to do about it? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Also, I would like to thank the Foundation and the Institute for inviting me and for organizing another event as an opportunity to discuss what's going on in Southeast Europe. And the first thing I would like to say is in Southeast Europe, the more things change, more they stay the same. So if you look at 1 year in terms of democratic progress, in terms of development of institutions in the countries of Southeast Europe, I really cannot see a progress, just the opposite, I have to say. We have another, I would say, a pressing issue, another problem, that one country which at least on the surface seems like a stable example of stability, that is Montenegro, is now sliding into a completely different situation. So all of you know what is going on there, and I'm definitely scared that when you speak of foreign influences, that influences from the east, especially from some countries which are also present in Serbia, like Russia, will definitely increase in Montenegro. What we also unfortunately have in Montenegro is the rise of nationalism, especially unfortunately in the Serbian minority, and definitely I would like to say that the relationships between different people, different nations in Montenegro have definitely not improved. We all even have some information about threats being directed at the Croatian minority there. So definitely the situation there is I would say much worse than it was 1 or 2 years ago. What we have in Serbia, on the other hand, we can see that we had the elections last year, the result of which was that we really don't have opposition. So 90%, almost all parliamentary parties, more than 90% of the parliament, belong to the ruling coalition, which is obviously pretty strange when we speak about democratic development. That's something which is really not something which is business as usual in democratic countries. So definitely we have a situation which does not seem very good. We have very strong control of the government over media, directly or indirectly, and this is a situation which also does not really look very good, not look much better than before. And of course, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we still have the same problems. I would like to when I speak of foreign influences, I think that Serbs there are mostly looking towards Russia. Bosniak political elites are looking more towards Turkey. The Croats are, I think, the only one of the constituent peoples there that are really committed to the European future of the Bosnia and Herzegovina. And we of course know that one of the pre-requirements for entry into to become a candidate country and start negotiations is the rule of law question. And there we have a situation that constitutional decisions of the Constitutional Court of Bosnia and Herzegovina are still not respected. That we have the problem of the electoral law, where still members of Bosniak people can elect Croatian representatives in the institutions, in the parliament and in the presidency. So definitely we do not see a real improvement there. And now, of course, with this whole non-paper, which seems to be some kind of a manipulation, because it was denied by Slovenia to be created by them. So also it seems that somebody is also trying to destabilize additional situation there, which also does not look very, very, very promising. And on top of it all, we have the problem with vaccination, where again we can see that unfortunately some countries are looking more towards Russia and China than towards the European Union, and this is also being advertised and marketed as a good example of this, so some kind of non-aligned or whatever policy. Which also is not something that I think is very good, because we've seen that before in the beginning of the crisis of the pandemic, that whatever comes from for instance Russia is advertised. National media, for instance, in Serbia are putting strong emphasis on this, while when help comes from European Union, that is not really advertised in the same sense. So people there get the impression that European Union is not helping them, while Russia is helping them. So this is also one example of, I think, trying to sit on two chairs at the same time, which I do not think shows a real commitment to the European part of Serbia. So there are big. I will not analyze all the countries. Of course, what I think is a good development is the opening of negotiations, decision to open negotiations with Albania and North Macedonia. This is something that in the parliament strongly supported. Croatia also strongly supported this. And I think that's one good example, one good development. But in general, I do not think that we can really be satisfied with what has happened in the last 6 months or 1 year. Of course, in the parliament has always been the strongest supporter of the accession of European Union towards Southeast Europe, because this is our strategic backyard. Southeast European countries are surrounded by European Union, and we cannot be secure. We cannot speak about secure European Union without the integration of the countries of Southeast Europe. So in terms of the future of the pandemic, in terms of migration as well, which is a big problem. So we still have illegal migrants accessing countries of Southeast Europe and putting pressure on the external borders of the European Union, especially Croatian and Bosnian border. So this is obviously an area which is very strategically important for the European Union. European Union is doing what it can on its part with all the limitations which exist in the European Union in terms of decision making and everything that we are aware of. But we have to get some real sincere will on part of the countries of Southeast Europe to really become part of the European Union. And I'm not sure whether we see it in all the countries. In some countries, yes, but in some countries, as I said, it seems that they are kind of trying to do a balancing act between European Union, Russia, China, and this is something which is not very, very promising. Of course, that's one set of problems. That's not to say that we don't have problems with the European Union. You all know that enlargement of the EU is not one of the priorities of the EU. That EU is more focused on its own problems, its own internal problems, its own institutional infrastructure, which we cannot agree on what to do next. And that is also something that needs to be taken into account. One of the biggest problems, obviously, is the decision making in the foreign policy, common foreign and security policy, where you know that we still have unanimity requirement in the Council, that the Parliament does not have real strong powers there. We discuss a lot, we make resolutions, but we cannot really make a clear legally binding impact on EU foreign policy. So it's still in the intergovernmental structure in the common foreign and security policy, and you know that it is very hard to find a consensus between 27 different member states. I'll mention two examples: Nord Stream, relationship with Russia, obviously. So different countries have different views on this depending on their own strategic concerns and their own national interests. And the other example is Turkey, where we have big problems in the Mediterranean, in Cyprus, in the relations between Greece and Turkey on one side. But on the other side, it's very hard to get a common European approach towards this. You know that some member states are thinking about putting more pressure on Turkey, even imposing sanctions towards Turkey. Some other member states are more reluctant to do so. So that's also, that lack of unity is also one of the main challenges. So what I think I would like to commend the Commission. I think the Commission is doing what it can in these circumstances, especially with vaccination. So you know that the European Union has problems in getting enough numbers of vaccines, but we are still, even despite of this, European Union is exporting parts of these vaccines to the countries of Southeast Europe and trying to help them. And I think that's one positive example and one thing that highlights the positive attitude of the European Commission towards the countries of Southeast Europe, which of course is also very important for the European Union as well, because if we only vaccinate people in the EU, but we do not do this in countries of Southeast Europe, where we have a lot of cross-border movement, a lot of integration between countries of the EU, like Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is a country of the Southeast Europe, then definitely the pandemic can come back to the European Union through these countries. This is something that we have to avoid. So we have to make sure that the Southeast Europe does not become the new breeding ground for the new for the new types of coronavirus. And I think that definitely this should be one of the European priorities there. So to sum up, I think in some countries, especially, things have not really improved. We have a new problem, I think, in Montenegro. European Union has its own problems, but I think that we have to push and continue with the dialogue with countries of Southeast Europe to provide them with as much help as possible, and to try to use these positive examples, like like the vaccine, like strengthening investments into countries of Southeast Europe, and thereby giving them another perspective. Than because without this, they would turn more towards Russia and China. Also, one example, Montenegro. You know that they have problems with their budget because of the motorway, and the debts that they have towards the Chinese. So this is, I think, one good example where EU can really help and put something concrete to give some concrete benefits to the Montenegrins, to show them that European Union is really supporting them. So EU is supporting them. EU is doing a lot, but I think that we can do even more. That we have to think in these geopolitical terms, and see what other ways can be done to strengthen our influence in these countries, not just in terms of the negotiations, political dialogue, etc., but also in economic terms and public health terms, and really try to strengthen our help for the countries of Southeast Europe. And then we will see who is really sincere about the European perspective in these countries, and who is looking more towards Russia, China, and other countries as well. So this is what I have to say, but I'm at the moment, but I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sokol, for this excellent overview of the development in the majority of the countries of Southeast Europe. I believe there will be some comments, not only from our speakers, but also from the Zoom audience. Please feel free to ask your question anytime in the chat box. So you have also mentioned Montenegro. I'm really pleased that Ms. Jovana Marovic, Executive Director of the think tank Politikon from Podgorica, is here with us. So Jovana, Montenegro continues to actively pursue a policy of joining the EU, but how are the relations with other regional and great powers affecting this process? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alexandra. Hello, I'm really pleased to be with you today and to discuss some, let's say, important internal developments in Montenegro. But when it comes to the EU integration process, I guess that there are no developments at all for the whole region, and also for Montenegro. Montenegro is always an interesting case. First of all, it is still front runner of the European integration process, but we are now in some kind of apathy because of the let's say, EU's approach towards the region and Montenegro, but also because of the internal problems and polarization in the country, and some major issues which are still obstacle in the European integration process in achievement of the best results in the rule of law reform. So to answer the question whether the EU integration is still best case scenario for the Western Balkans, it is. But at the moment, we are not sure where this whole process is leading. And why it is so? Because no major developments are expected for this and even for the next year when it comes to European integration process. First of all, Slovenia will take presidency of the Council and over the EU, and that means that at least for the moment we are discussing the non-paper from the cabinet of the Slovenian Prime Minister. We are not sure whether he's from the cabinet, but at least we are discussing the solution of the Western Balkan countries and changing of the borders, which is not like step forward in terms of the European integration process. And the EU is still quiet on this matter. It will be really important to have their statement and explanation why this is not a good thing for the Western Balkans. The second thing is that after Slovenia, France will take presidency over the EU, and that means that France is the country which so far blocked the European integration process in the countries from the Western Balkans. The second thing is about the new methodology. Montenegro is still waiting for the guidelines for application of the new methodology. and accepted the new methodology in May last year. Montenegro so far has opened all the negotiating chapters, and that means that at least technical progress has been achieved in all of these chapters. And that means that Montenegro actually accepted to negotiate under stricter conditions within the negotiations. But at the moment, what Commissioner for Neighborhood presented in the public about the application of the new methodology for Montenegro is not that much optimistic and that much motivating factor for Montenegro, because all instruments are the same, because we will negotiate under the same conditions, same interim benchmarks, and the focus is on punishment. I guess that punishment and sanctions are not that much motivating factor for the country. There were some announcements in February last year when the new methodology was presented that there will be incentives for the Western Balkans, but I don't see that in these announcements from the Commissioner for Neighborhood. The second thing about new methodology is that now the member states will prepare some kind of overview of the situation in the countries, and that's really important. But what the Western Balkan countries really need is to have active engagement of the member states in the countries, and that means help in the institutions how to perform and how to reform and how to speed up the democratization process. And then the most important thing that now the primacy in the European Union has political decision making and not merit-based decision making. And Montenegro is still waiting to see whether it is part of the package of the Western Balkans, or Montenegro will be evaluated as a country which is really, as I said, has mostly progressed in the European integration process. When it comes to situation in Montenegro, the positive thing is that we have changed government after 30 years, but that's the only positive thing at the moment about the democratization in the country. At least there is home-growing interest in the Western Balkans for changes, and the examples are Montenegro, also Kosovo, but some kind of at the local level in Bosnia and Herzegovina during the last year. And now, in accordance with the recent BEPAC public opinion poll, 80% of Montenegrins believe that it is possible to change the government through elections. That's something which should be used for good in the Western Balkans, meaning that at least there is awareness among citizens that they can influence the democratization process. But when it comes to situation in Montenegro, there is unstable support for the government in the parliament. There are various coalitions and political parties which are supporting the new government in Montenegro, including right-wing Democratic Front, from right-wing Democratic Front to moderate and green URA. There are lots of interests there and there are lots of opinions, and it's true that there is growing nationalism in Montenegro, which is not helping reforms in the country. But it's not, like that's not the position of the government, at least not on the paper, because leaders of three coalitions signed the agreement with principles for the European integration process, including the NATO membership, recognition of Kosovo, and the other topics. What is the problem in the country is DF, as I said, which is populistic pro-Russian party, and which is trying to influence Prime Minister and the rest of the government in order to have and to fulfill some their own interests and some benefits within the government. And their supporters are major problems when it comes to nationalism. But what is there is also misunderstanding regarding Montenegrin nationalism, because Serbian nationalism is also influencing Montenegrin nationalism in the country, and that's something which is really is further polarizing the situation in the country. But when it comes to institutional reforms, the major issue is that we still have strong political influence of the previous government over, or the previous ruling party over the judiciary, and that the new government is not taking positive steps when it comes to reform of judiciary. They are trying to switch one political influence with the other political influence, and that's really something which is criticized from the European Commission, and that's not the way to reform the country and to speed up the European integration process. So it's certain that the Montenegro has to fulfill obligations of the European integration process, but at the moment there are no positive signals on that. And the third most important thing at the moment is that Montenegro has public debt which is over 100% of the GDP, and that's mainly because of the highway project and this cooperation with Chinese company which is building the highway in the country, and the policy has not changed. I guess that the cooperation with China is not one of the priorities of the new government, but there was reaction from the vice president from his visit to Brussels during the last month about the negative influence of China in the country, and he was literally begging the EU to help the country to overcome this negative situation and this really major financial issues in the country. And that then at least we have reaction from the EU level. The EU is trying to focus and to find solution for the growing public debt in the country. And in that sense, we are expecting at least some new projects from the EU level in order to help country to cope with this Chinese influence. But it's not just about the highway. China was for the first time mentioned at the first place in accordance with the foreign direct investment in the country during the last year, and such information is confidential. So that means that all data regarding the influence of China in the country is not public, and the non-transparency is something which is following all the projects which are connected with China. When it comes to Russia, it is at the moment in the background, but because of those right-wing and pro-Russian parties which are supporting the government, it's not certain what will be the further influence of Russia in the country. And it's also true that Russia is still at the top of the countries in accordance with the foreign direct investment in the country. But Montenegro is fulfilling their international obligations, and Montenegro joined new sanctions against Russia as NATO member. So I guess that at least, as I said on the paper, we have this foreign policy course still same as it was with the previous government, and which is the only one possible when it comes to a country which wants to join the EU. So I guess that's enough for the first round. I will answer the question during the second round.
Thank you very much, Jovana, for your introductory statement. You have basically touched upon all the questions we have asked. Yes, you said there is no alternative to the EU accession. And then in the second part, you elaborated that actually disrupting forces for the EU accession process are partly coming from within the EU and partly due to the activities of external actors such as China or Russia. I believe there will be more questions coming in the second part of our roundtable discussion. Now we shall turn to North Macedonia. Good morning, Rade. What is new in North Macedonia? How is Skopje coping with the presence of the USA, Turkey, Russia, China, the Gulf states, and their goals and interests in North Macedonia? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alexandra. It's a real pleasure for being part of this auditorium, and I'm very glad to keep the continuity in those sessions. Regarding the alternative to the EU accession, probably the absolute answer of this question is no. Probably there is no alternative for North Macedonia for being a EU member state. But as I will not repeat the key points of the previous speakers, and in general, we can conclude that, that there is no visible outcome in the moment between the EU credibility and consistency of the EU enlargement process and the measurable achievement of the countries as it can be seen from the report progress reports. From the other side, we are facing with let's say additional challenge after solving the name dispute with Greece. Now we entered in new, let's say, unconventional or irrational challenge that is the dispute with Bulgaria about the identity and about the history. But from the other side, especially from Brussels, we are not receiving the clear signals about the Brussels position regarding this assault of the EU values and fundaments from Bulgaria, and from the other side, it's totally against this, let's say, Bulgarian government comportment. It's totally against that we saw during the Bulgarian EU presidency. And moreover, I will say that it is not unexpected. We are not surprised. We are not surprised from this comportment. But now it looks like some kind of deal between Greece and Bulgaria when the one will finish and achieve the goals, as it was with the name change. Now we will have the next challenge for let's say. Opening the history issues and the issues regarding the identity. So I think it was to emphasize a topic in the society, and I will not continue regarding this issue further. But from the other side, if we see what is happening in North Macedonia, beside this sunny weather that we have in the last days, there is no key challenge. And if we are consistent regarding the measurement of the real progress in the country, now it seems to be more or less same and the era of Nikola Gruevski. So again, we have the populistic government, and it's very hard to manage such processes with such kind of government. On the daily basis, we have, let's say, the failure of the state policy in many areas, especially in the foreign affairs and the social policy. Regarding the second question about the relationship of the country with big powers, I will openly say that there is no traditional relation between North Macedonia and Russia, and North Macedonia and China. Let's say I'm talking about the continuity of these relationships. But from the other side, the country recognizes United States as a strategic partner, and probably we are more grateful to US for our NATO membership. And now we can see some movements in the US foreign policy toward the Macedonian-Bulgarian dispute. So from the other side, there is also some achievements with renewing the relationships with Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Austria, and we can see the outcomes of these relationships, especially toward the dispute with Bulgaria. From the other side, measuring the efficiency of the foreign policy, we saw the total failure of the foreign policy, especially those so-called vaccine diplomacy. And when other states were trying to find the solutions for the citizens and for trying to find the sources for procurement of the vaccines, our politicians, they were, let's say, stuck in the election on pre-election processes. So probably today we have a country with the lowest rate probably in the region of the vaccination of the population as an outcome of this, let's say, I will say, so-called phenomena. And regarding how the country is resilient to the path of Europeanization, I will say that we still have the weak points, and those weak points are following us in the last 30 years. So organized crime and corruption are still present on the highest level. So probably North Macedonia is one of the countries in the region that don't have still, let's say, structured underground. So our underground is still on the highest level in the government. So we are again facing with the autocratic regimes. So if we had huge expectations after Gruevski era that finally this country will become the democracy. Now we see some kind of comportment which is not so far different from the era of Gruevski. From the other side, there's strong points toward Europeanization. We can see that the country is still implementing the EU strategies and following the EU policies. I saw the statement of the minister in the government, and he said if we hypothetically open the negotiations with the European Union, we will have 1/3 of the goals achieved, or we will have the harmonization of our legislative at such level. So probably the expectations of the ordinary people are especially toward the monitoring. So we are expecting the strong monitoring of the European Union in the negotiation process, and moreover, in this moment when we need to do this progress. The public became more critical in the last 5 years, and the public and now we see that the government is deterring from some decisions, and it is a very good and measurable achievement in the society. So I mark this as a strong point of the society. So I will stop here, and probably I will give some inputs in the second session. So. And I'm expecting your questions. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Rade, for answering and giving us insight into the situation in North Macedonia. So you basically also stress that there is no alternative to the EU accession in North Macedonia. However difficult it is, having in mind that as some other new member states of the EU, also the North Macedonia is facing difficulties and obstacles by some of the current EU member states. So there is no alternative, and the relationships with other external actors in North Macedonia are not disrupting the relationship with the EU. As regards the third question, you said that there is a need to further strengthen the rules-based order in Macedonia, and that the EU is giving its full support to the process. Now we shall turn to Serbia. I am happy to have you again here with us, Marko. So how do you see the influence of other big players on the relationship with the EU, and is Serbian democracy resilient enough to remain on the path of the Europeanization? So please, Marko, the floor is yours.
Well, first customary question is, can you hear me well? I hope that you can. Okay, excellent. Thank you. As you have asked, I will focus on Serbia. And if I touch upon issues in other countries in the region, I hope my colleagues will forgive me. The first question, is there an alternative to the EU accession? The short answer, as Rade has said, would still be no. The aforementioned third actors still do not offer a comprehensive framework for reforming a country. This has been true for over a decade now, and I remember well our former chief negotiator, Tanja Miščević, saying this back in 2007. So this hasn't really changed. But for the sake of the argument, I would say that we are living the alternative. Since the start of negotiations back in December 2014. We have a highly critical report by the European Parliament, which follows upon two also quite critical progress reports in 2019 and 2020. Since the last time we've seen each other in person back in February last year, in little over a year, we have witnessed, I would argue, if not worsening, then definitely stagnation of Serbia's European perspective. And there are many reasons. One concerns the country's COVID-19 response and the choices it had made. The entire relationship with China, which has some time ago by my dear colleague Stefan Vladisavljev been dubbed the steel friendship. And to a lesser extent, relationship with Russia. Now to a lesser extent, I would even argue. Response to COVID-19, something that was meant to be a public health issue, has since become a highly political and geopolitical issue. And while EU's initial response was arguably unsatisfactory, I think that the Union quickly understood the damage its image in the Western Balkans will sustain. And of course, we remember all the statements, we remember the criticism, we remember the concern. I would stay away here from the ongoing issue across all of our countries of authorizing and administering vaccines, because a lot of flack that the EU gets, in my view, here is undeserved. So the EU has mobilized resources it had at its disposal and has redirected IPA funds, Instrument for Pre-Accession Assistance, and started working on the Recovery and Investment Plan. EU had changed its narrative over China and further actors' presence in the Western Balkans. I think this is a major shift or a major change. Together with my colleagues, I've been witness to this change over a period of a couple of years, and I must welcome it. The other principal issue, and there are many angles to this particular problem, is of course the state of democracy in Serbia. And I mean, it is a long story, so I will just try to run through it in a couple of sentences. We have dominance of one political party. We have a parliament that suffers from lack of legitimacy. We now have a danger that important constitutional changes will be rushed through parliament, through such a parliament as well. We have numerous affairs. The European Parliament mentions 5 major ones in its report, but every week, literally, there is a new one. And one cannot anymore speak of increasing political polarization, rather that there is complete political polarization. So watching the evening news of 2 major television programs, one that is state-owned and the other that is cable broadcasted, would lead you to a conclusion that we live in 2 different realities, 2 different countries. And finally, there's the uncertainty surrounding the European Parliament mediated inter-party political dialogue, IPD, which is now in all of the EU's reports and terminology. And it's supposed to start in a week's time. And at this moment, after months and months of deliberations, really I have nothing encouraging to report. And I would be happy to answer any question with regard to EPD. The second question that you've asked is, are the relationships with the Western Balkan countries disrupting the relationship with other big powers, disrupting the relationship with the EU? And I mean, for Serbia, this is clear. When it comes to foreign policy alignment, yes, it still hovers just about 50%. Belgrade-based ISAC fund publishes a yearly report, and it's always just about 50%. I mean, the main reason for Serbia why this alignment will continue to be fairly low when compared to our neighbors is, of course, Kosovo issue, and this balancing act, as it had been called a long time ago, will continue. Agreement, or if there is significant sustained pressure from the West, which again, for many different reasons, and I would be happy to elaborate more if there are questions, still seems unlikely. I mean, there are also other parts of this story, how the world has changed over a generation, has become more multipolar, and the preeminence of the West is today far from certain. Or for instance, how Serbia's president is successful and or skillful in nurturing bilateral ties with different countries and regimes. They're not exclusively European and most definitely not exclusively democratic. And your third question, which actually has another question tied to it, are young democracies resilient enough to remain on the path of Europeanization? And also, what steps should think tanks, organizations take? I mean, I don't know whether I would use the term young democracies anymore. We tend to move in circles. I mean, Serbia 10 years ago was a democratic country, more democratic than several EU members today are. And its political leaders hoped that if not together with Croatia, and of this I learned very recently, we could become a member by 2017. I mean, it's 2021 now, and that perspective is, of course, long gone. But that said, resilience is, of course, important, and it depends on core principles of liberal democracy. So strict separation of powers, strong enough institutions that enjoy a certain level of professional and political autonomy next to having the right kind of capacity needed to undertake reform, and a media landscape that is diverse and to the largest possible extent free. I mean, it's clear that at this moment, these 3 points we lack in Serbia. And we also see in all of our neighboring countries that there are teething problems or issues, if you want to stick with this idea of young democracies, where you have to basically fight for these 3 principles. And that is a constant struggle. On the steps that think tanks should take, well, you know, I think that pandemic and the whole situation has, of course, affected our work in a way that we don't meet physically, and I think that we all miss that. But we are trying with these events and these hybrid events. I mean, the research is still going strong, cooperation is still going strong. Maybe we miss more direct contact and more direct deliberation at times. There are a lot of misunderstandings because of a number of us, I'd say, today communicate, not exclusively, but communicate a lot through social networks. And social networks are, well, there are problems with social networks and how we communicate when we are there. What my organization is trying to do now more and more is, together with other organizations in Belgrade and in Serbia, we are trying to support grassroots initiatives in local communities. And I can say with great amount of certainty, I mean, these initiatives, citizen initiatives, are very much alive. And there remains significant democratic potential in Serbia. I would be happy to elaborate more. Some of it is very issue based. I mean, now I would argue that the biggest issue coming to the fore of citizens' awareness and attention is, of course, the environment, protection of the environment. Only 10 days ago, we had maybe not the first, but a major environmental protest where the general idea was to have all the local movements come in front of the National Assembly and simply say that this is enough, and how the country is developing brings great concerns for the state of our environment. And that is a new issue. But as with many other issues, will these movements find a political voice, and how will it fit into this quite complex landscape of Serbian opposition is another issue. I will stop here and wait for questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Marko, for your elaborate and honest view from Serbia. We are happy to hear, as was the case with all other speakers, that there is no alternative to the EU accession, however difficult this process is, both on the parts of the EU and both regarding the necessary reforms in the country. We would definitely like to hear more about the topics you've mentioned, like the inter-party dialogue. But first of all, I would like to give the floor to our audience. Yes, please, Mr. I will unmute you. Ask to unmute.
Thank you very much. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Gazim Kasakol. I'm the ambassador of Republic of Kosovo in Zagreb, in Croatia. And I will try to give a Kosovo perspective regarding the issue of European integration, since there's no representative of Kosovo in this panel. I was also a Minister of European Integration and Chief Negotiator for the SAA on behalf of Kosovo. So I think I can give you some sort of an idea of the situation in Kosovo. We have an expression in Kosovo when we say that if I start telling you my worries and my concerns, I'm going to make you forget yours. So when I hear representatives from Western Balkan countries talking about their problems, I will add to that by mentioning all the Kosovo issues that we have been facing with since we started some sort of communication and negotiation with the European Union. I remember in 2013 when we initialized the SAA between the European Union and Kosovo. I appeared on TV and I said, now I can use the expression that we don't have a dream anymore, we have a plan. Unfortunately, 7 years after, I think we still have to go back to the dream issue. When I was in Brussels, and I traveled a lot in Brussels, I learned to hate two expressions: creative solution and think outside the box. So everything that had to do with Kosovo, and I think that applies to Western Balkans as well now, has to be some sort of a creative solution. Believe it or not, I think that even EU has to wake up and to see the reality that we are living in. Mr. Sokol, he was mentioning about the rise of nationalism in Western Balkans. I think that the EU itself is not giving a good example to Western Balkan countries. There is a rise of nationalism even within EU, which in a way deteriorates from the European path and is not a good example to be given to the countries of Western Balkans. But what has EU for this period of time done for the countries of Western Balkans? I think it's mostly band-aid solutions. I think that EU, again, should wake up and see and ask themselves whether they should stick to this model. Is this the model that we need? I remember in 2011, I was in a meeting in the German parliament, and I mentioned the issue of the influence of other countries, other stakeholders in the Balkans. And we see that happening now. 10 years later, we see that happening now. I can tell you from my country, in Kosovo, and I'm not going to present it as the Garden of Eden, but I see a huge influence of these actors, especially Turkey. And this is very problematic because whatever EU wants to do in the near future, it will not only face Kosovo and fulfilling of criteria, but will also face these other actors. And how is EU going to deal with these actors? Now, EU has imposed the criteria fulfilling process. Now, in case of Kosovo, this has not proven to be the right approach. Let me mention the issue of visa liberalization. Kosovo has fulfilled all the criteria. Nevertheless, although with the support of European Parliament and some European mechanisms, Kosovo still lacks visa liberalization, and we're stuck here. So so EU is not giving us enough arguments to continue the European path, because it don't matter if you deliver or not, the EU has its own political agenda. Adding to that, we have 5 countries of EU that have not recognized Kosovo, which always creates a burden for every single process that Kosovo wants to enter. So our path is not a normal path. Despite, I believe, the process of delivering what the European Commission, European Union has asked from us, starting from the special court, we have complied with that. Or with democratic elections. Now we have a new government, the opposition, that is actually being powered in a very, very democratic process. And these are all examples that I think the European Union fails to see. Now, I was trying to give you just an idea of what the situation in Kosovo is, although the support for European Union is still very, very strong. You have to understand that the last survey that we have done, it's almost 80%, because Kosovo people do not have an exit strategy. We don't have another alternative path. This is our path. This is the path that we want to follow. But with this methodology, with this way of thinking of the European Union, and especially in the last period of time, what we see is that the European Union, it's not gaining those who question the path, but it's losing those, like in case of Montenegro, that had a clear idea. So my question to the European Union, to the European Parliament representative and European Commission is this the way, is this the path that European Union is going to stick to, or whether is going to see if there is an alternative, a better way for the countries of Western Balkans to enter European Union. So I thank you very much.
So thank you very much for your statement. Before giving floor to Mr. Sokol, who I believe would like to answer the questions you have posed, I would just like to say that we as organizers have contacted a couple of think tanks from the Kosovo. Unfortunately, we were not able to establish that contact into a lasting one. So thank you for your input. Mr. Sokol, please. I believe you would like to make a statement.
Yes, thank you very much. I agree completely, actually, with Mr. Kasapoli. Yes, the European Union should actually give something to the countries which are really trying sincerely to fulfill the European criteria. And I think Kosovo in general is a good example there. I mean, it's not perfect, but I think there is more sincerity in this than in some other countries. But you already mentioned the problem. So there are 5 countries who do not recognize Kosovo. I will be very open about this, who do not recognize Kosovo because of their own internal problems, their own internal parts of their countries which have some secessionist tendencies. I mean, let's be clear about this. Or they're afraid that there will be secessionist tendencies. And as I said in the beginning, since European Union common foreign and security policy is made by way of consensus, it's very hard to get a common opinion on Kosovo, and there are these countries who, for their own internal reasons, do not want to recognize Kosovo. Then it's very hard to very hard to get a common policy on Kosovo. But I agree in general. I already mentioned the Montenegrin example. So so I think one of the good ways for those countries which really are open to for the European path, who are really sincerely looking towards Europe, is to really provide them help. whether financial, whether in terms of facilitating free movement. So I agree with this. But I said reasons for this are also to a big extent on the part of the European Union, but the European Union is a union of 27 different member states who make decisions in common foreign policy by way of consensus, and it's really hard to get that consensus when different countries have different interests, different internal reasons for doing this or that.
Thank you very much. Now we have a question from the audience by Ms. Maria Rogulic from the Faculty of Political Science. She has a question for Mr. Rajkovčevski. North Macedonia is not the only candidate country that faced opposition of certain member states. However, it appears to be the only country where these issues cannot be resolved unless the country decides to make important concessions. Is it possible that the EU's general unwillingness to enlarge may be hiding behind particular member states and their bilateral issues with North Macedonia? And if yes, how could it be overcome? Please, Rade.
Thank you, Ms. Rogulic. Largely, it depends on what is the topic of the discussion or topic of the dispute. Now, as I said previously, after the name dispute, now we have again, let's say, irrational dispute, talking about the identity. Probably it's not the same as you saw. As you saw previously in the dispute between Croatia and Slovenia, they agreed that they are going to find the solution. But it's a land, it's a border, and I don't know. Probably I will not say they were more business oriented, but in general, in finding the solution. But in general, now we have the. If you see now we start discussing with Bulgaria, we have this historical committee talking about the mutual history, talking about the popular persons in the history. And from the other side, if you see now watching now we have some kind of deal. So now we have the opportunity to watch the Bulgarian TV channels in North Macedonia and vice versa, watching the Macedonian TV channel in Bulgaria, which I'm pretty skeptical toward this second issue, especially toward the Macedonian history. But we see that the official Bulgarian television is still trying to, let's say, to copy some very important topics from the folk songs. Even the folk songs created 2 decades ago, they are presenting now as a Bulgarian, and they said your history started in 1944. So if even this kind of polarization in the society exists. I remember in the past when we discussed even in the academical level, you will find the statement of the Bulgarian academia, one nation in 2 states. I said, okay, I don't have a problem. So the Skopje will be the capital. They say, no, Sofia is the capital. So we are trying to make a joke, but it became the reality. And in this moment, I can see the solution of this topic. So we should proclaim ourselves as a Bulgarian or converted Bulgarians. Really, in this space of the Balkan exists the Macedonian identity. It can be found everywhere. So I totally I agree the position of the historical of the representatives of the bilateral historical committee. And now from the other side, we have the politicians, and now they are doing the input, very serious input on the work of this bilateral historical committee. From the other side, you have the argument-based findings about the identity and about the history, and from the other side, you have Zaev, which, for example, for Zaev, there is no. He will find a solution for everything. So I don't know how to present his mindset. He's the politicians, but promoted in the economic area. For the best achievement of Zaev was selling one truck of tomato in Sarajevo. That is the best achievement of Zaev in doing business. And now he's trying to reflect this mindset in the political, let's say, in the political environment. And that's why we have so many failures in many areas of the domestic policy.
Thank you very much, Rade. I don't see for the moment any. Yes, there is Mr. Stefan Vladislavljev.
Yeah, it's getting more and more prominent. That second actual last name, it's getting a little bit more difficult to pronounce from time to time. I would like to thank to everyone of the speakers who have raised a lot of important topics. But I would like to pose my question to Jovana Marovic, and she mentioned, and it got mentioned a couple of times, the situation regarding the public debt and the Chinese role in the overall structure of the public debt. And last couple of weeks have been again shedding the light on the story following the plea made by Ditana Bazovic to the European Commission. But what I would like to ask is actually about the response of the European Union and how it was perceived, first and foremost, in Montenegro, because I have the insight from the other sectors of the Western Balkans. Because I could not believe that first no was so prompt, and that the first response was actually no, we cannot do anything about it, about the specific question of the debt. And after that, the narrative has shifted a little bit, and we had other statements that have referred to the long-term solutions and the mechanisms that will be used from the long-term investment plan in the Western Balkans, and overall the restructuring of the macroeconomical situation in the debt structure. But the first question is actually that perception of that first no and that prompt no. And the second one, and this goes for Ms. Marovic, but also Mr. Sokol is someone who can refer to this question as well. What are the specific mechanisms that can be used in this situation? And I'm speaking specifically about the situation of the loan taken from the Exim Bank and the CRBC project of the highway construction, because we can speak about long-term restructuring, we can speak about long-term macroeconomic stability, but the first payment is due for this summer or fall, if I'm not mistaken. And long-term, of course, EU has been and will be probably the biggest support in dealing with this kind of situations. But what can EU or Montenegro do to pour out this short-term fire that's been bursting out for some time, and now it's catching the whole house? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm giving floor to Jovana.
Thank you. Well, the first reaction from the EU was from the EU spokeswoman. She said for the Radio Free Europe that EU will help Montenegro in some way, but that information was in different way somehow published in the local newspaper. Local newspaper actually announced that the EU will repay would repay the loan to instead of Montenegro to Chinese, and that was misunderstanding between the EU and the local reaction, and that's why the EU reacted again explaining that they will not for sure repay the loan, but that they will use different instruments to help Montenegro. And then the last reaction was from the Commissioner for Neighborhood and enlargement, and he said that the European Commission and the EU is cooperating on a daily basis with Montenegro, trying to find solution for the issue and for the highway project. And the reactions were different. The part of the opposition was even celebrating that the EU will not help the country. So the way it was like, you know, but it's kind of different when you are monitoring the situation in the country from the social networks and, you know, from the local media. And as I said, the reactions were really different. The part of the public and also part of the political parties were like satisfied with the answer that there is no way and that the EU cannot somehow be mediator and somehow find solution for the highway and for the huge public debt. And the rest was again trying to reach the EU and to explain why this is so important that the EU and why the EU should help the Montenegro with this with repaying the loan. And then for the second question, I guess that there are some examples when the EU was actually jumped into kind of repaying the loan, not in a way, you know, like taking the obligation, but providing different loan. And then, you know, this will for sure further complicate the situation with the public debt and financial situation in the country in general. But in terms that you are switching one influence with another, that's for sure good for Montenegro. So there is a way to provide different loan under the different conditions, and then Montenegro to use it to repay the loan to China. And the second thing is that which the EU is announcing that they will provide some project, but it's not, I'm not sure what they mean. So we are waiting to see what they have in mind with this new like strategy towards Montenegro.
Yeah, if I may just, because I think the question is also directed at me. Partly, yes. I mean, this is a typical situation. So the EU in general does not provide direct help or taking over loans towards third parties, but it can provide help in other areas which are connected to this. There is the economic and investment plan for the Western Balkans. There are the instruments in the European Investment Bank and EBRD who can definitely help Montenegro, maybe provide additional support from other areas which could then help Montenegro free some of the funds then to easier repay this loan. So, but this is not a typical situation. It's very hard for me to speak about concrete instruments. As I said, I think it will be hard to directly give money to repay the loan, but there are different financial possibilities, either through grants or through loans with low interest rates, which can help Montenegro in general. And then it will be easier for Montenegro to repay the debt. But I cannot make any definitive statements at this point. We have to wait for the Commission and the other institutions to say something more concretely after they analyze everything.
Thank you very much. We have also one question by Sanja Vujacic. She would like to address Mr. Fiesinger. So please, Ms. Vujacic.
Yes, hello, Sanja Vujacic speaking. I hold a PhD degree in political science, international relations from the University of Paris-Saclay in France, and I'm a member of Croatian think tank HUNS. And we are discussing all those questions in HUNS, and almost what would be the role of Europe in the world. And I think what we did not talk about is the Occidentalism crisis. of course, I'm talking about the belief in the superiority of the West, making Europe experience a deep identity crisis. On the one hand, Germany and Eastern countries believe that economic power is enough to maintain Europe's influence in the world. On the other hand, France is rather lonely while encouraging the European Union members to organize their military force and develop a minimum of strategic autonomy within NATO. This in order, of course, to play a significant role in the new geopolitical world center. Of course, I'm talking about in the Pacific area, where France is well positioned. I want to say that, in my opinion, this disagreement makes that the European Union is just not perceived as a reliable actor on the international stage. This is what compromises its future, as well as its enlargement, of course. That was to answer many interesting questions from our colleagues from Montenegro, Kosovo, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment, but I'm not sure what direct question you are directing on me. If it is,
okay.
Yeah, okay.
No, I just wanted to say that the European Union is living a deep crisis, identity crisis, and that the question of enlargement gets lost in this deep, because we need to define our European foreign policy and to have a minimum of strategic autonomy within NATO, to give lessons to our colleagues that are still out of the European Union.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is it clear?
Yeah, thanks. I suppose that your question is going into direction, but I wanted to be sure. Of course, you must differ from acting and from perceiving. Maybe the perceivement from the outside, from EU, is not always in the same right way as a European Union is acting. Internationally, I think that, of course, to a certain extent, the influence is reduced, but not in a strong way. Wherever in the world are existing some crises, the European Union is vividly showing what is their plan, what could be done, maybe by cooperation, maybe by sanction, whatever. Also, if there are some conflicts, European Union and also, of course, in alliance with NATO, always is taking a part of a solution. That European Union, of course, has some internal socio-political and especially also institutional problems, which may lead to some lack of this identity. This is clear. So many members, so many interests you have within the European Union, the more Western countries. You have the Visegrad group, you have the new members like Bulgaria and Croatia. So that means it is always very, very difficult to find some common sensus, and this is maybe for the outside have some perceivement that there's no real identity. But in the core elements, I think European Union is still on the table. And we are still acting very vividly, very evidently. And this maybe is also one of our aims of Hans Heidel Foundation, where we are fighting for. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Fiesinger. We are coming to an end of our roundtable discussions. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of questions and issues to be discussed. But as we said, we shall meet again. And now I would like to ask, although Marco has touched upon it, I would like to ask each of the panelists to tell us what is the role of the think tanks in raising the awareness and keeping the awareness of the necessity to continue with the reforms in economy, politics, and society in the EU accession process. So what we as think tanks can do about it, please. Who would like to start? Jovana.
I'll start. Yeah, I think that I already mentioned that there is a home-growing interest in the Western Balkans for changes. And that's something which should be used in a way, you know, think tanks and civil society organizations in the Western Balkans are so far being able just to recognize the problems and also providing the same recommendations all over again. And that's not because of the lack of capacity in the think tanks, and it's not because of the meaning that they don't have a strategy and that they don't know the way forward. The real issue is the country are not moving forward, and that there is no progress in the democratization. So at the moment, and after so many years of stagnation and democratic backsliding, there is a moment for the new strategy from think tanks. And I think that strategy should include the building of the rule of law strategy, rule of law culture in the Western Balkans, which is lacking. And that's for sure a long-term goal, and there is a need for the long-term strategy, building all levels of society in that sense. The second thing is that what we need in the Western Balkans is civic participation and citizens which are aware that they can influence the progress and the democratization in the country. And that's why I think that at least they have to participate in the voting, and during the election they have to control decision makers and to be part of the decision making process, and they have to take collective actions. And think tanks should be there to influence their awareness and their readiness to participate in the processes. And I already mentioned the fact that now 80% of citizens in Montenegro believe in changes to elections, but there is also another data that, for example, 88% of Montenegrins have never requested data through the request for information. And that's something which shows that at least they are not well informed about mechanisms to participate in decision making. So I guess that the first goal of the think tanks should be to build awareness among citizens about the need for their active participation in the processes and in the democratization. And then the different part and different level is to influence the EU in explaining why it is important to change approach towards the Western Balkans. And then finally, the most difficult part is how to influence decision makers in the countries. And I'm not much optimistic about that level.
Thank you very much. Rade, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alexander. In general, we are talking about how the think tanks should look in the environment, in general environment in the country. Probably the main challenge is how to build or how to keep the integrity of the civil society organization representatives, and the second issue is the how they present their findings and how they present their remarks or their proposals. Are they research based? Are they have the arguments? Are they come from some political kitchen, or are they come from some field survey? So, and probably the second very important issue is what is the perspective of the government, and what does the government want from the civil society representative? Are they see the civil society organizations as a partner, as a complementary, by definition, as it should be the complementary actor for making the things better, or are they see the civil society organization just to fulfill this, let's say, just to fulfill the form, and in the second perspective, probably we have mostly the civil society organization with very expressed level of hostility toward the government, and the politicization of the civil society sector. So in general, as Joanna mentioned, probably we cannot see the clear strategy of the government how to involve not only the civil society organization but the individuals in those participatory actions. So everything is happening, let's say, spontaneously. So there is no clear guidelines, and there is no clear strategy how to involve the general public in evaluating the government decisions, the government measures, and in general the government activities. Recently, the government, under the strong pressure of the public, decided to announce the list of honorary of let's say honorary persons paid by the government, and after many let's say discussions and many scandals, they decided to announce this list. And on the list we saw that there are 53 persons paid by the government, starting from 500 euros to 1,200. I think I'm not sure about the top level of those payments, but in general about 80% of the persons on the list, they are coming from the civil society sector and from the PR industry. So it was a strong indicator that there is a clear strategy of the government how to affect these strategic communications, which should be, let's say, partial. That should be partially part of the job of the civil society sector. And moreover, they decided to cover. They didn't publish 3 other names, and from those 3 other names that were not on the list, we concluded they have very strong ties with the government. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would only like to add shortly Mr. Rakoczewski's statement, because I think it is really some crucial question. Today in the morning, I had another online conference. It was some preparation of Tirana Connectivity Forum, which is dealing each year with the outcome and results of Berlin process. And one of the comments was, and reactions was also, that civil societies in this Berlin process, which should simply more express regional ownership. The civil society organizations are only still as some watchdog, but not very influential. I remember that I think it was the third summit of a Berlin process in Vienna a couple of years already ago. It was decided that the civil societies, the NGOs, get much stronger influence in this socio-political process. But I see on the other side, nothing had happened in really. So it is really some crucial question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fiesinger. Marco, would you also like to add something, please?
I mean, you know, not to take too much of your time, because this is an issue for itself, and it really deserves a separate panel and a conference. But, you know, we need to continue what we have been doing. We need to outreach more. We need to advocate more. I mean, we need to fight the current situation as well. I mean, because it's more difficult, of course, now to reach people. I mean, there is no real substitute for meeting someone in person, as we all know. In Serbia, I mean, I work for an organization that is really committed to establishing different partnerships in different areas of life with different actors. And this is something that we all need to keep on doing. I can, one thing that comes to my mind, there is no issue that is, you know, difficult or untouchable, or, I mean, I've seen how we have managed to create, all of us together. A colleague of mine likes to say, an epistemic community of sort between think tankers and analysts from Serbia and Kosovo. This has been one of the, I think, nice accomplishments that accompanied the normalization process. So, I mean, if it has been possible on that particular issue, then, I mean, you know, there's no really another issue that it's not possible. So we all need to work more. And also what Rade had said, integrity, it's going to remain, I think, being the principal thing, and also, you know, stating things, you know, as they are, not running away or hiding from inconvenient truths. That's also part of our role in our societies.
Thank you very much for these last inputs. So the role of the think tanks and also of the NGOs in the region continues to be, as Jovana has said at the beginning, the one of the mediators between the EU and respective candidate or potential candidate country and actually their audiences, domestic public. It should, as Marco said, advocate among the domestic public and keep the interest for the EU and the accession process and provide information on the accession process. But what Rade said, it is also necessary for the civil society to keep its integrity and develop further their role in the society. I would like to ask Sandro now for some concluding remarks. Please, Sandro, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed, Alexandra. I will start by thanking all panelists for very, very interesting interventions. It will take me at least half an hour to make sure that I did not omit noticing each and every aspect that they mentioned. However, time constraints limit me to a couple of minutes only, so I would like to pick up only one point that was for me the leading idea that is actually happening behind the debate that we are having here today. So we have witnessed different aspects of complexity in the region, but there's a thing that I dare to call the complexity of the narrative of unfinished business in the region is something that struck me from the presentations of all panelists. And when we speak about panelists, and I'm happy to know them all very well in person, we're speaking about moderate and progressive young intellectuals from the region, and all of them have underlined the fact that the issues related to history and identity are still there and they are literally boiling, regardless of 30 years of investments of the so-called Western society into what was about to be called the long-term consolidation of the region. So in this environment, populists that are in position or in opposition today are gonna keep growing, and they're gonna keep acting as a substantial obstacle to further progress in consolidation of the region or each of the particular state within the region. And of course, this opens an opportunity for other players to jump in and to cement their positions. But when you grab a little bit and when you try to unravel the story, you see, at least when you take into account the economic numbers, you see that these actors, regardless of the fact that we are in the momentum, that they are more visible than the efforts of the EU and of the West, they're actually only the spoilers of the ongoing transformative process that's not gonna be blocked, regardless of the fact that it's in a very, very difficult shape right now. You know, other actors cannot compete with the attractiveness of lucrative pre-accession funds. We can discuss how they were managed, how they were channelized from the EU, and what are the audit mechanisms to make sure that they are channelized on the local level in the appropriate way. But when you take a sum of the EU pre-accession funds, and when you put it, you know, on the paper against the sums that other players can offer, it's obvious that these other players in the long run cannot compete with the EU and funds that the EU has to offer. On the other hand, even more, when you analyze the basic macroeconomic data, such as, for example, trade balance, you see that the markets of the Western Balkan states are destined to be connected to the EU markets, regardless of the subcategory that you discuss, exports of imports. They are simply closely connected to the markets of the EU, unlike the situation with the markets of other players that we have discussed here. However, the spoilers are increasingly visible, and it's obvious that even in this local arena, there is a decreasing number of actors that are interested for the sustainable continuation of the process. And this is actually, if I understood the messages of our discussion today, and this is where the role of think tanks is really important to so to say, fight back against this depressive environment and trends in the region. And I subscribe to all messages about the potential role of the think tanks in the region, and especially the remark that, you know, the legitimacy of the think tanks in the region should be strengthened. But I would like to close by reminding that all these think tanks are, you know, swimming in the pools where local political elites treat them more as foes than as friends. And these think tanks also have to abide by the market rules. So if we are obviously facing the period where the local elites will not be so open and generous towards the think tanks, and on the other hand, we have to face the fact that the funding from abroad is shrinking, we have to ask ourselves how these think tanks will be capable of fulfilling their roles if simply you are kind of cleansing them of capacity to perform. So I would like to close this by reminding ourselves that if we want to have these think tanks having their role, we have to be clear that we make sure to guarantee their support in this period that is in front of us. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to see them performing in the way we would like them to perform. Thank you very much indeed.
And on this note, I would like to thank you all for being with us. Thank you, Sandra, for these concluding remarks. You always do it excellently, and we are happy to cooperate with you again. Thank to all of our speakers, to all the questions from the audience, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you all.